Hi, everybody. Thank you. I'll repeat myself then real quickly. I'm Connor Ofston, a coastal scientist with Woods Hole Group, here to speak on the Surf Drive Beach and Dune Restoration Feasibility Study, a project funded by the Coastal Zone Management Office of Massachusetts to the town of Falmouth, and then I'm with Woods Hole Group. So we are here to speak to property owners specifically who are have a stake in this project and may be impacted by the outcome. And we're going to talk about some of the things we've learned through the past 6 months. I'll quickly go over our project team. Our project lead is Peter Johnson-Staub from the town of Falmouth. Thanks so much for being here. Peter McConerty has also been instrumental, and Mike Renshaw, town manager, has been a part of the project as well. We also are now joined by Josh Wrigley from the Coastal Resiliency. What is your title? I'm sorry. Coastal Resiliency Specialist. Again, our funder is the Coastal Zone Management Office, and we have Rebecca Haney in attendance here tonight, so she is able to speak from the state perspective if you have questions along that line. I'm Connor Ofston, the project manager, and Leslie Fields here, our project advisor, is in the audience as well. The goal of this project was to evaluate the feasibility and performance and longevity of various beach and dune restoration alternatives. Beach and dune restoration, what is that in general? Beach restoration involves nourishing beaches, bringing in sand and building out beaches wider and higher. Similarly, for dune restoration, that involves bringing in sand, sediment, cobble, whatever is compatible with the beach, and building up your dune system a bit higher to create a buffer between whatever you have landward, in this case, public roadway, between that and the ocean. So we were looking at the feasibility of that. And feasibility means, can we do this? From all sorts of perspectives. From the science perspective, does it do anything in the face of waves, or does it just get eroded when there's a storm? From the permitting perspective, is this something that the permitters will accept? Is this in keeping with the regulations of the Wetlands Protection Act, for instance? And then as well as engineering and design. How much space do we have? Can we build something here that is actually of any value? And what does that cost? So I'm going to walk through all of those components. The goal of a beach and or dune restoration project would be to combat beach erosion, reduce wave overtopping. This picture on the right-hand side here is from January 13th, 2024, I believe. A time when there was extreme wave overtopping of the road and undermining and overwash. A lot of sediment was washed into the road, and Peter McConerty and DPW needed to maintain that very quickly. So those are the types of situations and storm events that we're looking to try to reduce the impacts of, reduce the damage of. Simultaneously, though, we're looking at helping the habitat which exists on Surf Drive. So Surf Drive is a very valuable resource for native plants, shorebirds, benthics, all sorts of organisms that utilize these rare habitats. And we're looking to use nature-based solutions to both improve our protection, but improve their habitat. And third, let's see if I can get rid of that down there. I'm not sure how to do that. Thirdly, we are here to help minimize storm damage to public and private assets, enhancing both recreation and public access. I'll quickly go through some of the past planning studies that got us here. So the town of Falmouth has been looking at coastal hazards for a long time, for decades, frankly. Recently, we have been looking at sea level rise and how that is affecting the storms that we see. It's increasing the severity, it's increasing the frequency of these storms, and it's also leading to erosion. So we're considering coastal erosion here, coastal storm inundation, which is pictured in the figure above, and sea level rise. This figure here is just presented to show you how severe flooding can get today. This map is actually representing 2008's probability of flooding. The darkest blue areas would be expected to flood 100%, as in once per year at a minimum. So there are areas that are, understandably wet all the time. We have Vineyard Sound to the south. We have Salt Pond, Sitter's Pond, Oyster Pond, et cetera. areas that are expected to be wet all the time. And then we have areas along the beach that get flooded. But you can see that the roadway colors vary between a light blue and a purple, showing that the roadway can get flooded once a year, twice, or once every year, once every 5 years in various areas. So the vulnerability of the roadway is really high today. And sea level rise is only going in one direction, and it's increasing that vulnerability. So I wanted to show a video here of January 13th, 2024, just demonstrating the need for this project. This was a video, I think, possibly taken by Peter, at the Salt Pond Inlet, the herring run there. This storm, the waves, the peak of the wave event didn't actually align exactly with the peak of the tide. So this storm could have been worse, could have been more damaging, but still the water levels were high enough and the waves were large enough to overtop. But to put it in context, this storm was about a 4-year to 5-year storm, something that we could expect every 4 to 5 years. The water level was about 4 feet NAVD, which is approximately 4 feet above mean sea level. To compare that with other past storms, Hurricane Sandy was a little bit higher. Hurricane Bob exceeded that by about 1.5 feet. Hurricane Carol and 1938, the Great Hurricane of 1938, those were the most extreme water levels on record in this area. And those were incredibly damaging to any infrastructure that was along the barrier beach. Ed, in the audience here, told us that his parcel's home was either washed away or washed upstream to Salt Pond. Is that correct, Ed? It washed all the way up to the top of Salt Pond towards downtown. Yeah. We've got a small group here. I think we can be, yeah, we don't have to be too formal. Okay. 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 Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So Ed has an example of a cottage that was washed away from Hurricane Bob. That extreme water level that was a bit higher than we saw in January. But these kinds of storms do happen, and they're likely to happen more frequently with sea level rise. I really wish I could get rid of this thing. What's that? Thank you. All right. Yep, I hit that one. That's as minimal as I can get. Thank you, Leslie. All right, again, looking at our past studies, where are we going today? The town of Falmouth has worked through the thought process of how to manage surf drive. And the conclusions of their studies were, one, we know that we need to take action. There's erosion, there's undermining, there's flooding, there's vulnerable assets. How do we want to do that? The lowest hanging fruit was beach and dune restoration. From a permitting standpoint, from a bolstering the resources which exist there and leaning into what surf drive is, which is a barrier beach, beach and dune restoration were proposed as a way to improve our resilience in the near term. But in the long term, it's recognized that sea level rise may overwhelm surf drive. So removing road sections is a pathway that is on the town of Falmouth's radar, and one that may come sooner than later, depending on what storms we see. So going into what our study did, we looked at the 1.5 mile stretch from Trunk River to Shore Street, from west to east. We mapped habitat, we mapped topography, we mapped eelgrass, we mapped all of the existing infrastructure, the edge of the road, the corners of the buildings, took inventory of all the various assets. A wetland resource delineation is a regulatory document which maps the habitats that are protected by the Wetlands Protection Act. The things that we found are not particularly surprising. We are here on a barrier beach. Barrier beaches are beaches which exist between an open ocean and an inland bay. So we have an inland bay at Oyster Pond and Salt Pond and Fresh River. And so this beach and dune system here is considered barrier beach. A bit further east at the public beach, that's no longer a barrier beach, but it still is coastal beach, coastal dune, and regulated in that manner. If we go further inland to the shorelines of Salt Pond and Oyster Pond, for instance, there are wetlands, some salt marsh, some isolated wetlands. And this is what the beach looks like today, but I think this is the homeowners meeting, so folks on the call are well aware of what their beaches look like. One thing to note, Trunk River down at the southwest corner is a bit coarser grained. You can see the gravel and cobble in that picture, but as we move from west to east, we have a bit more sand mixed in. So speaking of sediment cover, again, at Trunk River, there is a lot of cobble and gravel. That means we have pebbles on the size of about 1/2 inch to 2 inches, sometimes 4 and sometimes a little bit more. And cobble is a material which reacts differently to storm waves. So instead of eroding and becoming nearshore sandbars, cobble often washes up the beach and becomes a storm berm. But if we move along the beach, the sediment distribution changes from mixed grain sediment in the top right to predominantly sand with some cobble to almost entirely sand in some patches. Our mapping efforts map the topography of the site, and it doesn't take a full-scale mapping effort to know that the area is incredibly low. But now we know exactly how low it is, and we can do that on engineering plan sheets, and that helps us design what a project could look like at the end of the day. But the roadway itself is sitting at about 6 feet, 5 to 6 feet NAVD in its lowest points. And as I talked about, the water level of that 5-year storm was 4 to 4.5 feet NAVD. So it was only about 1/2 foot underneath some of the lowest roadways. If you add waves on top of that, that's why we easily see roadway overtopping on a regular basis during the winter times. In addition, it's not just low, the beach is also very narrow. So this is a cross section cut through one of the parts west of Salt Pond Inlet. Here's the Salt Pond Inlet. A lot of the cottages are just here to the east. Our transect is coming through down here. And the beach is about 100 feet wide at high tide. There is a coastal dune present here. Coastal dunes are a berm or just raised profile at the top of the beach, in the upper beach. But here we are seeing almost no coastal dune. So the lack of a dune there means that this area is going to be much more vulnerable. But also the lack of beach width here means that if we're going to design a dune, we don't have very much space to do it. Another thing we learned through this project is that there are protected species on the beach. Now, many of the public probably are well aware of the piping plover and the least tern presence on the beaches. We talked to Mass Audubon, we talked to Natural Heritage. They are nesting on a regular basis annually for the past 5 years. That the degree to which they are doing so kind of comes and goes. I'm not sure actually what it is today. They may be nesting today. We just saw a few piping plovers nesting in Westport. So this is their season. So if you are out on the beach, keep your eye out for nesting piping plovers. These are threatened species and species of special concern. So any project, beach restoration, dune restoration, needs to think about these. Now, they need beach habitat, so a project can be good for them, but a project could also impact them. Construction needs to be taking place outside of their time of year of nesting and foraging, and a project also needs to be designed so that it's not a barrier to their general activity. Secondly, we have sea beach knotweed and salt pond pennywort. Strangely, those texts are not loading very well, but we found out that there are some threatened plant species present in the overwash areas of the dune, and those also further constrain what we might be able to do. Nourishment, placing sand on threatened vegetation could be considered a taking and might need mitigation or might not be possible outright. Lastly, we did an eelgrass survey, and this is a mixed bag of news for the residents. One is that there is a large, healthy bed of eelgrass, and that's a very good thing. Eelgrass tends to stabilize. It has a root system, and it helps hold sand in place. It also helps us accrete sand. So there's a very large, healthy bed of eelgrass here. Our survey went a few hundred feet offshore. We couldn't get to the deeper waters, but Mass DEP projects that those eelgrass beds go out about 1,000 feet. So we mapped that eelgrass bed very near to shore. We were in a boat. We had a camera underneath us. Thank you to the harbor master who allowed us to do that. And then we couldn't even get as far inshore as the eelgrass went. So we had to come back on foot and wade our way through the water to map the eelgrass that in some cases was as close as 40 feet off of the high tide line. So that eelgrass is playing a role in stabilizing the beaches. Many of the residents who have cottages here noted at our first public meeting that their beach hasn't changed very much. And that's true. This beach in front of the cottages is one of the most healthy beaches along the whole reach. That's the widest area. There are some dunes there that are in a good state relative to other parts of the coastline. But the presence of that eelgrass is also protected. It is an essential fish habitat. So placing sediment on eelgrass would smother it. It would kill it. And it would be really hard to get it back, frankly. It could take several years or it may not happen at all. And for that reason, we have rejected coastal beach nourishment from the project. So the Mass Department of Marine Fisheries requires a certain buffer from eelgrass, and placing sediment on that eelgrass is against the regulations. And again, that is to help protect the eelgrass, and the eelgrass is helping to protect surf drive. So there is a benefit there to maintaining the eelgrass, but because beach nourishment is not feasible, we are now starting to restrict the area within which we can build a project to buffer surf drive from storms. Other rejected alternatives are hard armoring. So we have pictured here breakwaters, seawalls, and groins, all of which came up at our first meeting. You know, people will say, we have surf drive, that's what we want to protect, just put a wall there. And it's coming from a very understandable place. But barrier beaches don't function in the way that a seawall wants to function. Barrier beaches ebb and flow with the tides and with the storms. If they're given enough sediment and enough space to migrate, they will sustain themselves even in the face of sea level rise. However, if we try to plant our flag right here on one part of the beach is going to move its way all around us, and that flag that we're planted is possibly going to find itself out in the middle of the ocean at the end of the day. Seawalls in particular are not a great solution on barrier beaches. They exist along the Cohasset, across, this is Marshfield's coastline for one instance, and they tend to reflect wave energy. So that means waves are coming in from the ocean, they're reflecting off of the seawall, which is the intention of the seawall, but that energy is not lost. It is instead just driven into the bed of the sand in front of that seawall. So it is causing scour. It's removing all of the sediment at its seaward side, and the volume of the beach will drop and drop and drop over time. So what you are left with is just a seawall and very little beach, almost no beach, even at low tide. Once you do that, when you lose your sediment, waves can come in closer. Instead of breaking offshore by a sandbar or breaking on the beach and then running up to your seawall, they're now breaking on your seawall. And that kind of forcing can cause a lot of damage. So you can see here, there are sidewalks and patios that are uplifted from a storm. There's a significant amount of overtopping and overwash, flooding homes. And trying to maintain a seawall on the edge of a high energy coastline like this can be really difficult and really expensive. Secondly, we have the breakwaters, another potential solution that was thrown out as to a way to address wave energy and reduce erosion. But breakwaters, they can break wave energy and they can help with sediment erosion, but they have no play on storm surge water levels. So sea level rise and storm surge will continue to wash right over and right past a breakwater. So those flood maps that I showed you at the beginning of the presentation would still stand. There would not really be a change to that. not likely, from a breakwater. And with sea level rise, the flooding frequency of Surf Drive would continue. Groins, I don't want to take too much time on this topic, are a third sort of hard armoring, and they actually exist on Surf Drive right now. So they've been used and they've been attempted to hold sediment in place. But in this picture here along the reach west of Salt Pond Inlet just shows us that groin or no groin, the beach is very narrow. All right, so I've kind of shared the bad news in those constraints, but I want to talk about some of the opportunities here. So conceptual alternatives for adaptation, we looked at 4. There's a no action alternative. Maybe the best thing to do is to just live as we do on Surf Drive, let it evolve naturally, and respond in kind to storms. So that alternative we do in all of our engineering projects, but is one that is seriously considered. A second is dune restoration. How big can we build a dune to protect us? Can we build a wide dune, put a lot of sediment in there? Even if it's sacrificial, that sediment can serve the beach volume at the end of the day. It can prevent wave run-up and overtopping. It can help protect against undermining of Surf Drive. Third is targeted improvements, which is essentially using dune restoration sparingly, using it where it's needed most. So instead of restoring 1.5 miles of shoreline, let's look at the areas that are most vulnerable, lacking of dune, and let's just use our money there. And then lastly, the managed retreat and phased adaptation. There are potential phases to managed retreat. So again, the town has already thought about this a bit, but there's a lot of thinking and a lot of communication that needs to be done regarding managed retreat. We can remove a seaward lane and start to slowly phase our way out. If we moved the seaward lane of Surf Drive, we would now have more space for a dune, more space for a project that could improve the resiliency of our area. Secondly, if we removed both lanes, if we moved utilities, we wouldn't have as much that is vulnerable. All right, so in the context of these alternatives, I'm going to just show you what they could look like at 2 reaches at the same time. So it might be a lot of information at once, but because this is a property owners meeting, we wanted to show the cross sections along private property. We have what we're calling the Moores Beach Reach here, west of Salt Pond Inlet, and then we're going to look at the cottages area in section C there. So the no action alternative, I'm just showing you what the existing condition is. Again, this is an area where we have very narrow beach, very little dune present. There are some pockets of dune. And then in the cottages area, the beach is a bit wider and the dunes are a bit more robust where houses don't exist. So the no action in cross section, this helps us look at the elevations. Surf Drive is sitting at about 5 to 6 feet. NAVD again, about 5 or 6 feet above mean sea level. At the cottages, there is a dune in many cases that rises up to about 6, sometimes 7 feet NAVD, and that's providing some of the protection along that reach. Dune restoration, alternative 2 that we looked at is proposed along the entire 1.5 mile reach. Here you can see the footprint of dune restoration in this kind of dotted polygon here, showing the footprint at the Moores Beach Reach. We are essentially occupying as much of the upper beach as we possibly can, trying to get as much sediment into the system as we can, because sediment is what's needed to maintain the beach and maintain the habitat. Along the residence reach along the cottages, we're a bit more constrained. There's not as much space because of the homes that are there. So we're looking to restore the edge of dune, the toe of dune, as much as possible and fill in areas that may exist between the homes. What this looks like in cross section, you can see this dune here coming up to about 8 feet NAVD, so it'll be about 3 feet above the roadway in alternative 2. Likely you would still be able to see the ocean from your car in this scenario, but you would have a much better protection between the ocean and the road, especially at Moores Beach where it's almost flat from the road to the water. That dune would then be planted with native vegetation, during the planting effort, it would primarily be American beach grass, but other native plants could seed there over time. Along the cottage's reach, that dune could look bigger and wider. There are certain parts where homes don't exist, where the dune could be raised up to about 8 feet NAVD again and sloped gently into the beach area. And then there are some areas where the cottages exist where maybe we can only capture some fill at the scarped toe of the existing dune. Alternative 3, we don't need to take too much time on this, but essentially this is the one where we are applying dune restoration where it's most needed. So that's to say the Moores Beach area is low and vulnerable and lacking beach width and lacking elevation. So the dune is proposed along Moores Beach in that polygon there, but not proposed along the cottages to the east. In cross-section, you can see the upper picture. That's the same as alternative 2, dune restoration. But then cross-section in the cottages area, no action is taken because that beach and dune are already relatively healthy compared to Moores Beach. All right, alternative 4A, this is the partial retreat with dune restoration. So again, we're very limited in what we can do. We could not do a beach nourishment project. So we are looking only at dune restoration. But we wanted to try to think creatively as to how can we get more sand into the system. Again, sand and cobble and gravel, this is what we need to enhance and preserve this barrier beach in the long term. So if one lane of Surf Drive were dropped, that seaward lane, we would gain about 15 feet of roadway width within which a dune could be expanded. So this project, this alternative is showing an expanded footprint within the right-of-way of Surf Drive. Now, Surf Drive could go from west to east. It could go from east to west. There is a lot of discussion, a lot of consideration as to what one lane on Surf Drive means, and I recognize that that has, cascading impacts throughout the town, and we can talk to that a little bit if you all have questions. But for the purposes of our modeling and understanding the performance of these alternatives, we wanted to see what the larger beach nourishment, dune nourishment project could do. If that lane were dropped, we could build a larger beach. We could build something up to 9 feet NAVD. At the cottages area, I think I put the wrong picture here. What we are proposing is to fill the scarp of that toe again where we can. But focus mostly on the upper picture. The dune in this picture is now about 15 feet wider, and because we can go wider, we can also go higher. So I want to talk to a little bit about the effectiveness and then the costs of these alternatives. We did some modeling. We did cross-shore modeling. We used a program called XBeach. XBeach runs waves over the beach. So we were able to model storms from a 2-year storm to a 5-year storm to a 20-year storm, and to see how that incrementally increasing severity of storm affects the sand on the beaches. Does it wash offshore? Does it wash onshore? Is there overtopping? Does the roadway get undermined? What is the impact? So these pictures are a bit complex, but I just want to focus you on 2 things. One is the solid black line and the tan fill underneath that. That's the existing condition. So that's where the starting point before a storm. And then we have the red picture here, or the red line, and that is the post-storm event. So we are looking here at a 20% storm, also known as a 5-year storm. This could be expected to occur at least up to once every 5 years. And so in the existing condition, the beach is dropping significantly. There's a lot of erosion. There's about 2 to 3 feet of erosion on the main beach, and there's about 1 to 2 feet of erosion potentially underneath the roadway itself. So the conclusion here is that 5-year storm, if we don't do anything, we're likely to see the roadway undermined and the beach eroded. Now, if we construct that dune that we talked about, not touching Surf Drive, no dropping of the lanes, putting as much sand as we can at the upper beach system, what is the result? Again, we're looking at Moores Beach, and that dune profile is now shown coming up here about 7 feet NAVD. So you can see that the difference between these 2 pictures, we have a much higher dune system in the second picture. and that dune then ties in with the existing beach. So the same storm was run against this profile with a restored dune, and the resulting red line is very different. Instead of undermining of the road, we see that the road is still in the same place. There's no drop of elevation there. We have lost the dune that we built, and that sediment has kind of found its way both inland as overwash and some falling to the near shore. But the important takeaway here is that a small dune can protect against a small storm. The third one to talk about is the expanded dune restoration. So if we dropped one lane of Surf Drive, gave ourselves 15 feet, and expanded our dune, we can go wider, we could go higher, and we could put more sand in the system. How does that respond to the same storm? Well, the dune is still expected to wash away in a 5-year storm. So it would be required to be maintained potentially with a high frequency, such as every 5 years. But the outcome is much better. One, you've put a lot of sand in the system, and that sand is enhancing the beaches and the barrier beach as a whole. Two, you have protected your roadway. There's no undermining of the roadway in this. So the red line and the black line in the footprint of the roadway are unchanged. And three, in this alternative, instead of losing a lot of beach, you can see this steep curve there. That's a steep scour of the beach. You have a much wider and more level beach. So if we dropped a lane, expanded the dune, you can both protect the roadway and you can protect the beach. Any questions on these figures before I move on? I just wanted to show what our modeling looked like in front of the cottages for the existing conditions versus the dune restoration. So existing conditions, there are some dunes there. There is a wider beach there. If there's a 5-year storm, we are expected to see overwash. That dune could wash out and wash into the roadway. And in fact, we saw a gain in elevation over the roadway. So that means the waves are pushing the sand onto the roadway. And that's when Peter has to come in and scrape up that sand off the road. If we restore the dune, what do we see? We don't see overwash onto the roadway, and we don't see erosion of the beach. So this small-scale dune restoration in front of the cottages can provide a significant level of protection. We have a 5-year storm washing over this dune. It's scarping at the toe. The black line you can see dropping by about 2 feet at the most, but the crest elevation of the dune is maintained. So the dune's integrity is still there. So rather than losing our dune and overwashing the road, we're maintaining our dune and protecting the road. This is a video of the largest, this is a 5%. Yes, this is a video of the larger storm that we modeled, a 20-year storm, greater than what we saw in 2024, and the largest nourishment project at Moores Beach. So this is what our model was doing. It was pushing waves onto the beach, potentially pulling them off, and then overwashing the beach as well once the storm met its peak. So we'll let that roll one more time because the ending is kind of dramatic, and that's where the interesting information is. But this is a 20-year storm. Just showing that even if we build the biggest dune that we think is feasible here, even if we drop a lane from Surf Drive to do so, that dune is not going to stand up against a moderately severe storm. I think I put the wrong presentation in here. I'm sorry about that. Oh my gosh, I put the wrong presentation in here. Give me one moment, please. What I wanted to show you next was the cost table. So let me pull that up. Okay. Zipping through to the end. We just have a couple slides left. All right, so this is where we had talked about the overwash of the dune, and this is what that final profile looked like. Now I want to go to the preliminary cost estimates of what those different alternatives were. So we have a no action alternative costing essentially $0. These are all construction costs, so there's a lot of maintenance associated with a no action alternative. Alternative 2, the maximum dune restoration without dropping a lane on Surf Drive was projected to cost about $3 million. Alternative 3, if we selectively restore dunes, rather than restoring the full 1.5 miles, if we just restore the areas where dunes are currently not really present, we can cut the project length essentially in half and cut the project cost in half. And then lastly, if we're going to remove a lane of the road and build a larger dune, the cost of that project is going to nearly double compared to alternative 2 to about $6 million. And that is only incorporating the cost to remove pavement and the cost to build and plant a dune. It does not have a cost associated with changing of the utility system that might come with that. All right, so because we kind of were concluding there that a 20-year storm will wipe out even the best project that we think we can design, it's kind of putting in our head that it's going to be inevitable that Surf Drive is not a tenable asset to maintain. It could be in the future, and with sea level rise, undermined with such frequency that it is incredibly costly to the town to maintain this roadway. The barrier beach itself can maintain itself in the face of sea level rise. Again, if we give the beach space, if we give it sediment, it can evolve, it can move and ebb and flow with the waves and with the seasons and with sea level, and Surf Drive Beach as a whole will be an asset for the town into the future. But the roadway itself, and again, planting your flag at the edge of the ocean is a hard thing to maintain in the face of sea level rise. So we wanted to explore retreating Surf Drive and maintaining in the short term, or maintaining to some degree over sand vehicle access. So we recognize, again, this is the homeowners meeting, that people need to get to their cottages. And this roadway is the only way to get there. So over sand vehicle access in the mid-term when this is occurring would be proposed. But essentially, the roadway from the Shining Sea Bikeway to Mills Ave could be retreated first. That's the most vulnerable reach. The public beach to the east of that is a bit less vulnerable. Houses are set back further. The dunes that do exist there are a bit higher and wider and providing more protection. So this is the most feasible reach and most necessary reach to consider retreating. So there's many phases to retreating. One is public outreach. So we recognize that there's going to be a lot of conversations in the town before anything like that occurs. There's also going to be a need to manage natural resources. Think about what's our rate of erosion? What are we going to do when the roadway is retreated? Do we replace that with dunes? Do we just let it evolve naturally? And then there's a lot of infrastructure. There's a sewer main underneath the Shining Sea Bikeway. There's a water main along Surf Drive itself. There are the private cottages. There are many hookups that need to be considered. So all of this is something that we're tackling a little bit in this project, but we're more trying to set the stage for future planning. Now, I don't think that Surf Drive is just going to be torn out from underneath anybody anytime soon. There are going to be triggers for adaptation, triggers for action. But one of those triggers could be a significant enough storm. If the roadway were damaged, if it were damaged along, a mile-long reach, if we had another Hurricane Bob, I think the conversation in the town could become more urgent, and the consideration of abandoning Surf Drive could be accelerated. All right, that is the presentation, And I'll take any questions that you guys have. Thank you. Leslie has a question. I don't think it's on.
How about now? Okay. On the cost table, I know you're talking about, let's say you do one of those alternatives and there's a storm and it's damaged. I think it'd be good for the public to know, if you're going to go back and renourish, are they looking at those same exact costs over and over and over again each time you do the renourishment?
Yeah.
I think I know the answer, but I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Thanks. That's Leslie, my coworker at Woods Hole Group. And she's asking a question. If the dune were to be eroded by a storm, what is the cost to replace it? Now, that cost was just construction. That was just materials, mobilization, and construction costs. So yes, those costs would be expected to be the same or, with inflation, given how much time has passed. Those were not engineering costs or permitting costs. There can be savings on the engineering and permitting side. If we do this once and we design a dune that, the town likes and wants to rebuild over and over, they can get permits that could be, re-upped essentially so that they could build the same project even after an erosive event. Thank you.
I was just going to say, can you go back to that slide so we can sort of look at what some of those numbers are? Yeah, so like if we're looking at alternative 3, which is the sort of targeted dune nourishment, you might be looking at 1.5 million each time you do it.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, one thing we are going to, at the end of this project, so June 30th is the end of this project, we're going to have a public report. There will be a publicly available story map, an easy way to engage with the project and understand what conclusions are. And one thing we are in the process of still working on is a damage estimate. So there are a lot of costs associated with not taking action. Damage of the roadway is a considerable cost to the town. So we are trying to quantify what no action could cost the town so that we can kind of compare the cost benefit of a project versus not a project.
So that means you'll have numbers under alternative 1. Like
I guess negative numbers, or
Yeah.
not negative numbers,
Yeah.
but
costs.
yes, we will have a
Cleanup,
comparison.
yeah. And then alternative 4A could be cheaper in the future because you wouldn't be removing that pavement each time.
Yes, that's correct. The
Okay.
pavement would be
All
a
right.
one-off.
Okay, I just want to make sure that was clear.
Yeah, thank you.
Great to be on this end of the presentation. Thank you. Eileen Gunn, resident of Falmouth. I'm actually supposed to be in the second meeting because I'm not a Surf Drive resident, so I got that wrong. But could you go back to the pictures that are more, aerial view of the
whole area?
yeah,
You want I can just go to the,
yeah, any of those.
okay.
So here, this is perfect. So my question is, let's say we do have another Hurricane Bob, and we've decided that the alternative 4 is the way we're going to go. There's going to be a point where the entire road gets washed out again. And is there any understanding about when there's actually a break into Salt Pond or Oyster Pond, and like thinking about the resilience of those areas and the town hall and everything as sea level rises and we have those openings? You like,
Are you
Sort of
talking about like a breach where
Yeah.
a new inlet forms?
yeah, like I'm a little getting ahead. Like,
Oh, that's okay. It's a great question.
If we decide on alternative 4. then
Oh, and begin to
we
retreat.
we make it a sand road
Mhm.
or a one-way sand road
Mm-hmm.
after the next storm or something. I mean, I think there needs to be a decision about what happens if there's a catastrophic situation again. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
I mean, right now it's great to have those alternatives, but if something happens this year and like Hurricane Bob and it's that destroyed again, like what are we going to do? And then my question is, if we allow it to evolve more naturally as a barrier and leave a one-lane sand road and there's a storm and there's a break and these other ponds are opened up, that leads to situations of flooding for the residents around those ponds. It affects when the town hall and town assets get further inundated. So is there any sense of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what was your name again?
Eileen.
Eileen, thank you. So Eileen, you're asking about what happens if a storm causes a breach and forms a new inlet that allows more water to get into Salt Pond, for instance, and up to Oyster Pond. You're worried about the vulnerability of downtown and
because if you look at
residents.
The coastal flood risk model now, that area is very vulnerable to flooding. So any kind of opening is going to seemingly advance that risk to the town.
So I think that can be true under low level storms, that more water could get in through a breach. So first I should say about a breach itself, it may be able to mend itself in time given the amount of sediment that would be freed up if we removed the roadway. Sediment transport over time would potentially fill those areas. Inlets can only be maintained if there's enough tidal prism in the upstream to flush the sand out repetitively with every cycle and keep that inlet open. So that would have to be studied. I don't know offhand if a new inlet would stick around. But while that inlet were there, if there were a breach during a low level storm or the tides, for instance, more water could certainly get up into Salt Pond, like you're saying. But I think with the extreme storms where the inland areas become more vulnerable, water is going to get over Surf Drive as it is today. So all of that water can still already get up into the system because the water levels during an extreme storm are high enough to overtop the roadway.
Connor, since this is a homeowners meeting, I thought we should just briefly touch on easements. And so we're looking at dune nourishment in front of private properties. Do you want to speak to that, or do you want me or Rebecca Haney to speak to that?
Yeah, thanks. I'll take a stab at it and you can all correct me, but thank you for the prompt, Peter. So a lot of this beach is private property. And if public funds are used to enhance private property and enhance the beach, enhance the dunes, bring sand into the system, it's very likely, especially if, it's very likely that an easement is going to be required. So an easement means you would have to sign on to the project to say that this is what you want. You want to accept these public funds to nourish your beach, nourish your dune. But as a result, you would have to allow for parallel public access to the shoreline. Now, Massachusetts already has public access laws allowing parallel access to the shoreline in the intertidal zone. And so these would be cementing those in some form, some language, providing an easement for people to access the shoreline. Now, that doesn't mean that people can walk through your house, walk underneath your garage and get to the beach and access the shoreline. The access to the shoreline still needs to be through public areas, such as the town beach. But then once there, they would then be able to move along the shoreline freely. Again, we have a small group. We can take any question. Even from town staff, that is completely fine.
That's okay. I think we'll wrap up the meeting here, and we have another meeting coming in a half hour. Thank you, Connor.
Thank you, Peter.